All right, so good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, perhaps, or good morning, maybe. So it's nice to see you one more time. I'm going to start talking about, I'm going to continue talking about the activity we have to develop in this week of work, right? So we're going to talk about the forum. Last time we explained what we need to present in this activity in the forum. We also read the learning guide specifications, right? We said we mentioned what the learning guide says, and it says cuando se quiere mirar en retrospectiva situaciones de la vida que han ocurrido a lo largo de ella, de la vida, pues es común llegar a un momento en donde sería, si hubiese hecho esto, habría sido mejor, ¿sí? ¿Cierto? Y para eso utilizamos el third conditional. Taking that into account, we are going to also study the componente formativo called You Can't Undo the Past. And finally, we are going to answer these three questions. We are going to choose a situation in the past that we are is not satisfied, doesn't make us satisfaction, so it's not satisfying for us. And we're going to choose this activity taking into account that no necesariamente debe ser una situación de la que se arrepienta porque fue mala, pudo haber sido algo que con el conocimiento que tiene hoy podría haber sido manejado de una mejor manera y decir luego cuál es el motivo por el cual tomó esa decisión en ese momento. In this case, you are using simple past tense, for example. And we are also going to answer the question, ¿por qué considera que lo habría manejado de una manera diferente el día de hoy? In this case, we are using simple present tense. So this is a suggestion. To answer question number 3, we can use simple present tense. To answer question number 2, we can use simple past tense because it's something that happened in the past. And in here, when we choose a situation in the past that that is not satisfactory for us, right? And we mentioned, si hubiese hecho esto, habría sido mejor haber hecho esto otro, ¿cierto? In this case, we're going to use the third conditional, and therefore we are going to study the third conditional today. Last time, we were doing a recap of what are regular and irregular verbs, right? Why are we studying this? Or why did we do a recap of this? Well, it was because we are going to, we were also studying how past perfect tense works. And we did this because a component, an important component of the third conditional is to understand how we use the past perfect tense. In general terms, we mentioned that the past perfect tense mentions an activity of the past that had a influence for another activity from the past in a older an older activity in the past. So we have two activities in the past. One is previous to the other, and the oldest activity makes an influence or makes an influence on the closest action to the present. So we have action number 1 and action number 2 in the graphic here. Action number 1 happened 3 months ago, and action number 2 happened 2 months ago. So action number 1, the one that happened 3 months ago, the oldest one, this activity made an influence on action number 2, on situation number 2. So what happened 3 months ago is important, or was important more precisely, to what happened 2 months ago. This is what we mentioned. It's the most important reason why we studied a past perfect tense. And additionally, we mentioned how the past perfect tense works. So we made a comparison between between Spanish, sorry, and English, and we discovered that the organization is pretty much the same, right? I mean, the order. Obviously, the words are going to be different, but the order is pretty much the same. Taking this into account, we mentioned that we are going to need an auxiliary verb. This auxiliary verb is going to be called had, and it's going to be used for woman, for women, for men, for singular, for plural forms, right? Third, second, first person of singular or plural. And we also need to take into account um, another verb, a main verb, and this verb is going to be in its past participle form. And this is why we did a recap of the irregular verbs. Once again, why did we study this specific topic? Because this is a topic from previous sessions. Well, we are going to study this topic because in today's session we are going to review, we're going to check again the third conditional. So there are four conditionals. ¿Vale? What's the difference between the conditionals before we go to the grammar? Well, the difference between the conditionals is that zero conditional expresses something that is 100% predictable. First conditional allows us to give a prediction about something. For example, if I go to New York, I will take as many pictures as possible. So when the situation number one happens, the situation number two, the probability of something happens with this condition is high, is too elevated, 90, 80% of probability of success. Second conditional mentions that when we have a situation, right, a condition, giving this condition, we are going to have a result. It's like when we play billiards. When we play billiards and we hit the white ball, if we hit the white ball, we are going to push the other balls, right? The violet, the green, the blue, and so on. So if we hit the white ball, the other balls are going to move. Let's take this into account. If something happens, then something else is going to happen at the same time. But in this case, the probability of success is even less reduced, maybe 20-30% of success. And finally, with third conditional, this is the conditional we are going to study today, we are going to do something similar. When there is a situation A, if this situation happens, because maybe it's not going to happen, but if this situation happens, then the probability of success or occurrence of the second situation or the second stage or the second activity is always zero, because we are using third conditional to talk about imaginary situations in the past. Why is the probability of success of the second situation, of the second activity, or the second moment? Well, easy. It's because we cannot change the past. We don't have the power to go back in time. So this is not possible for us, right? So this is why we are going to study third conditional. We're going to make some mention some details in a moment. But for now, I just want to mention that this is why we study past perfect tense, because past perfect tense is one of the components we're going to need to use the third conditional. And as the learning guide says, si hubiese hecho eso, habría sido mejor esto. Esta expresión nos permite expresar un nivel de arrepentimiento o remordimiento debido al hecho de no haber tenido el conocimiento que se tiene hoy de hoy en día, justo en ese momento. Para eso utilizamos el ter condicional para transmitir esas ideas, para expresar un arrepentimiento o un remordimiento de no haber podido hacer algo en el pasado. Again, we cannot change the past. This is an imaginary situation. Si hubiese ganado la lotería, hubiera pagado todas mis deudas. However, you didn't win the lottery, therefore you cannot pay your debts, right? So this is something we cannot do. So we are just thinking what could happen in the past if we had taken, sorry, a different action, a different decision, and this is third conditional. This is why we study third conditional. Okay, so we already know how the past perfect tense works. Now we're going to focus in the second situation, in the result, because this is the cause. We need to check now the effect. The past perfect tense is the initial condition. If this happens, if we see this situation, therefore the conclusion, the result, the final stage is going to be mentioned with perfect conditional. What is that? Well, the perfect conditional is an expression that uses the modal verb good or couldn't, the auxiliary verb have or has, and finally, the past participle of the verb. And this is why, again, we studied or we did a recap of regular verbs and also irregular verbs, because we are going to focus in the third conjugation of these verbs. ¿Vale? We already studied the difference between regular and irregular verbs. So let's go with the modal verb good. Modal verb good is used mainly to talk about the past, to talk about the future in the past, to express some conditional sentences. Here, we are going to focus in here. The other reasons are not important in this specific moment time, because this is something studied in another levels. But just for information, the modal verb good also expresses desire, polite requests, and questions, opinions, or hope, wishes, and regret. Okay? So this is why we use the modal verb good. And in this case, we are going to use it to complement a conditional sentence. Because the modal verb good is a modal verb or an auxiliary verb, remember that we cannot use more than an auxiliary verb or more than a modal verb in a sentence. Therefore, we cannot have more than one modal verb, and also they cannot change. They are never going to change. They are always going to be, this modal verb is always going to be good. In contrast to regular and irregular verbs. Remember that regular verbs and irregular verbs change. For example, read changes to read, or become changes to became. But good doesn't have any change. It only has one form. So this is the nature of these modal verbs. Okay? The structure for these modal verbs is normally this. We need a person who performs an action, but this action is modified with good. So the translation of good normally is ría, podría, querría, seríamos, podríamos, amaríamos, and so on. So what this verb does is to give steroids or give strength or increase the power of the main verb. For example, with like, for example, would be I like a cup of coffee. Me gusta una taza de café. But with I would like, or the contraction, I'd like a cup of coffee, it changes to me gustaría. right? So once again, the translation would be like ría, ría, ríamos, rían, right? In this context, there are more contexts, but in this context, this could be the most appropriate translation. But let's remember that this conditional verb is going to support the main verb. It's going to give esterates to the main verb. So this is the idea of the modal verbs. For negative sentences, the modal verb would change to would not or wouldn't. And for questions, like any other verbal tense, in present, in past, in future, and so on, we're going to use this auxiliary verb at the beginning of a question if we need to create a question. This is how the modal verb good works. Once again, why are we studying the modal verb good? Because this is one component, and a very important component, in fact, we need to take into account to create the third conditional. All right, so let's go back with the third conditional. We use the third conditional to talk about situations in the past that didn't happen. Or in other words, we use it to imagine how things could have been different in the past. Therefore, the third conditional is like a dream. So it's like a desire. What could have happened if we had taken this opportunity, if we have taken this decision, if we had stayed in the city where we were working, if we hadn't resigned to our job and so on, right? So third conditional is like a dream, but with no possibility of the dream come true. It could be a good dream or it could be a bad dream. Doesn't matter. It's just a dream. So we use third conditional to talk about circumstances that were possible in the past, but that didn't happen. And in turn, we imagine the result of this situation. Example, if I hadn't eaten so much, so this is the regrettable situation. I'm regretting to eat too much, right, in for lunch because I'm now full and maybe I'm feeling a little sick. Therefore, I would have felt sick. This is the result. So the beginning situation is that I ate too much. Because of this, the result or the conclusion is that I feel sick. So I'm feeling a sense of regret for eating too much, and I wish I hadn't do it. Maybe I should eat a little less. So in this moment, I would feel perfectly well. I would feel without any indigestion or any stomach ache or something similar, right? But I cannot change the past. I'm sorry. So in third conditional, we are thinking about an impossible past condition, which can never be true or can never be possible because it has finished. It has already ended, and we cannot change the past. We cannot travel back in time to change the past. Therefore, once again, is a dream. The results, a different result was possible in the past, last year, last month, last decade, last Monday. But today we cannot change the past. It's too late. We cannot do anything. So this is why um, third conditional talks about past events or that we wish or we would like them to be different as an alternative to what really happened. Therefore, the third conditional is used to express regret, criticism, or relief, maybe, after avoiding something bad. So fortunately, I didn't go, because if I had gone there, I would have a broken my arm. A buena hora que no fui, porque si no me hubiera roto el brazo, for example. So I'm so happy for this, right? How the third conditional works. Let's go with the grammar. Well, we have two possibilities to mention this conditional, and not only this conditional, the zero conditional, the first conditional, the second conditional, and obviously this third conditional. For all conditionals, we have the same way to present this situation. Every time we have the if word, this is conjunction, el sí condicional, right? Every time we use the if, we are going to take into account that this is the beginning, the starting situation. If this doesn't happen, nothing else happens. However, if this situation, the beginning situation happens, the probability of something else happening is going to be high, 100%, 80%, 30%, or 0%, depending on the conditional. 100%, zero conditional, 90, 80% for first conditional, 30, 20, 10% for a second conditional, and 0% for a third conditional. The structure, in this case, we are going to use the word if in the past perfect for the starting situation, and the result is going to be mentioned like good, have, and the past participle of the verb, the main verb. This is one possibility. The other possibility is to make a replacement, to reorganize this interaction. And we could also say would have and the main verb in past participle form, and then the conditional. It's like in Spanish when we say me hubiera roto el brazo si hubiese ido a la caminata, bueno, a la triatlón. Si hubiese ido a la triatlón, me hubiese roto el brazo. ¿Sí? So this is exactly the same. We can mention the result and then the starting situation, or we can start with the beginning and then mention the conclusion. Just take into account that if we start mentioning the starting activity, the initial activity, we need to use the comma to differentiate that we are mentioning two different sentences, two independent sentences. Let's go with examples. If we had booked in advance, we would have got a table. Option number one. Option number two. We would have got a table if we had booked in advance. Si hubiésemos agendado o reservado más bien con anterioridad, habríamos tenido una mesa. O habríamos tenido una mesa de restaurante, se entendería, si hubiésemos agendado o reservado con anterioridad. So we can mention the starting situation and then the conclusion, or vice versa. It's okay. Both options are possible. But let's remember that in the first structure, when we use the conditional in the beginning, the starting situation, we need a comma to separate the two parts of the sentence. Okay? So this is very important. And a quick summary. Remember that the third conditional is used to mention expired past conditions, or to mention possible past results. In terms of grammar, we are going to use the past perfect to mention the cause of the condition or the starting phase. And to mention the result or the effect or the conclusion, we're going to use the form would have and the past participle form of the regular or irregular verb. Finally, the probability, talking about probabilities, the probability of success, I mean, when we have this cause, the effect is going to be, or the result is going to be, is going to have a zero probability of success or a possibility of happening. And I mean, it's impossible to happen because we are talking about an imaginary situation from the past. So this is the third conditional. This is everything we need to remember. Finally, I'm going to close the session by sharing with you a couple of exercises in the platform in Sayuna. So the first exercise for you is this game. The objective of this game is to choose the correct conclusion according to the context. In this case, it says, if I had won the lottery, what's the correct action? I would have bought a car, or I could have driven a car. What's the correct option, right? There are 10 questions. And the second situation, and the second game I'm going to share with you in Zayuna is this other game. In this case, we are going to do something similar. We are going to complete the first sentence, the first part of the conditional, the third condition. In this case, if I had got a gold medal, si hubiese obtenido una medalla de oro, what's the correct result, the correct conclusion, the most coherent result? I would have been last. I would have been second. I would have been the winner. Sorry. I would have been third. If you get a gold medal, you are the last one. You are in the you are second in the podium. You are third in the podium, or you are third in the podium. So this is very obvious, right? So these two games, I'm going to share these two games in Zayuna for you to practice this topic. So this is all for today. I really appreciate your attendance, and I will meet you again next week. Okay, so take care, guys, and see you next time.